All right, Luke, it seemed like it was a newsworthy week. Precious metals, gold and silver were also doing kind of crazy stuff up and down. But it was almost too much to keep up with. What do you make of this week?
Yeah, we made a list again with the biggest movers, and I think 50% of the real movers actually had news. And I went through it, and I couldn't really find anything that interested me. The biggest mover this week was GMV Minerals, and this one went up like 133% without news. So I guess that some shareholders uh, have been holding it for a long time, and maybe I don't know. I cannot really. I've looked at it. I cannot really say why it's up. And it's interesting because by just $100,000, the company went up $7 or $8 million in market cap. That's how this market works.
Hmm.
But to come back to your question, yeah, there's not a lot of news that interested me this week. A couple of news releases we may discuss today. The first one that I have on my list here is SKRR, and they acquired a project. And also, this one is not really something that I would buy or that I'm interested in. But the reason I highlighted it is that this company was a $2 million company, and you can see that just buying a project for those companies can make a big difference. And I've been there myself with a company that at some point is only worth 2 or 3 million, and you know that they're searching for something, and all the shareholders that are still waiting are eagerly waiting for something to happen, and then suddenly a new project gets announced. And if it's something that people can relate to, for example, this one that is acquired from F3 Uranium, then
Hmm.
suddenly everybody gets excited. And yeah, so I don't know enough about this company again to really say this is good or bad, but I just wanted to highlight that it just takes buying a project to double your market cap sometimes.
Yeah, I
And
think I think they optioned like 70% of that project, right? Because
yeah,
F3 has a bunch of projects. F3 is also a small company, Uranium Explorer. It's been kind of famous lately. Very mixed opinions on it out there.
yeah,
But generally this was kind of a weird deal for me on the side of SKRR. They have a bunch of their own projects and they're going into uranium as well. They do have Ross McElroy, who I'm talking to soon. Because he's a president and director of SKRR. But I mean, it was a curious deal. I don't necessarily see the value increase right now. Maybe some people see a potential that I'm missing though, so that's why it went up.
yeah, I guess so. And I think it's often a company that has been very quiet for half a year or a year. There are always shareholders, of course, that are holding, and a lot of people that have sold. But the people that are holding, of course, are in touch with the management in most cases. And when there finally is some news, then that may be something that they're happy with. I mean, I had it a couple of times as well with small companies that I bought when they were small, or sometimes they became small over time. Um, and then you look forward to that for them to buy something, and you always hope for something that you like. And in some cases, you get disappointed because they buy something very early stage, and you were hoping for something more. But that's the risk of buying these $2 million companies. They are looking for option deals or for opportunities, and it's not easy to find good opportunities. So as a market, you need to react to that, or you could react to it. And in this case, it worked out well for this company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the other news releases, I couldn't really find something that interested me. Maybe people that are more into the lithium space, there were some lithium news releases. Maybe there are some interesting news releases, but not really something that catched my eye. And the other mover that interested me is a bit is Mirasol. I think most people who have been in the industry for a number of years know Mirasol. It's a prospect generator, and I think a couple of years ago was seen as one of the better ones. They have been going through a very difficult time, I guess, if you look at the share price and the market cap, but started to go up last year. And I think that's because people realized that they were one of the few companies with projects near Philo, especially small companies. And now with NGEX new discovery, this belt is really heating up more and more. NGEX had also had a pretty high grade intercept at their more advanced project this week. So that belt is getting better and better. And Mirasol is, I think, one of the 2 or 3 companies, small companies, with a pretty large land position. And that's why Mirasol, I think, is already up 3 times in the last months, because right now people really want to be part of that story and that belt. So that's the only thing I really wanted to say about Mirasol. And because there's not too much that I wanted to highlight, I decided to just select a number of companies that interest me. And some of them have moved this week, but just were not in the top 30 or 40 list this week.
Okay, I can see some of the ones that we've discussed. You sent me indeed a couple of these things. Some of the ones we've discussed previously, like Prospector, on here. What's happening there?
Yeah, so Prospector, there's not much that happened, but it suddenly jumped 24%. And we talked about Prospector mid-March. And the story was really like we were looking at companies that had cash in the bank with a good management team and a really depressed share price. And if you have a 4 or 5 or 6 million market cap and you also have 2 or 3 million in the bank, and you have also a very good management team, but your projects are simply overlooked or forgotten. All these companies went down in the bad year last year, and some of them were just very cheap to pick up. But then you need to believe in the team that they make it work. And Prospector was a company that I picked up the week after we talked about it at 17 cents. And now you see on very low volume though that it made a 24% move. And maybe that's because the placement was just closed. They did a small placement, and some of the management people bought, I think, $100,000. I think two. I think the CEO and one of the directors bought $100,000 each. So I think people think, oh, wow, that's interesting. Small company, directors that are aligned with the shareholders. They will start drilling, or maybe I don't know if they're already drilling on a nickel project in Ontario, and they have some EM targets that some people are excited about. And nickel, of course, is very popular right now. So I think it's a combination between exciting project, placement is closed, cheap company, and then you just have to wait for the company to make a move, and that's what just happened on very low volume. And I'm expecting, but that's not. It's really my best guess that this company will just move, continue to move to 30 cents, and maybe at that point results will kick in and will determine the future direction.
It seems like indeed, so we have Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Roberts buying shares on the same day, same number of
that's the
shares at the
placement.
same
That's
price.
the placement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they did a $1 million placement, 1.1, I think, and that closed last week. And this is what they reported.
Yeah.
And it's a meaningful number, I think, even for people that are, I don't think very very wealthy, but quite wealthy. It's still a pretty good vote of approval, and they already own a pretty big position, so it's a good sign, I think.
Okay. What's sort of your unanswered question here? What do you hope to see with this company? When would you be selling it?
Well, a company like this is looking for a new discovery. So it's always all these companies are looking like based on surface samples, geophysics, EM, and so there's always very high risk. The chance that they find something is very small. But my game is really to find these things when they are very depressed, when nobody wants them, like at 17 cents recently, and because that's just a very good level to get in, especially if you have a team like the Great Bear team, because a lot of people behind this company are the Great Bear people, the Discovery Group, and then the more difficult part is indeed, are you just going to trade it like this? I mean, you wait until it doubles and you sell it, or are you actually interested to hold on? And it depends what your strategy is. If you want to invest in 10 or 15 of the best exploration groups, then it's better to wait, because then you can wait for maybe one of them to make a big discovery, and then the others maybe do well or maybe not so well. But you only need 1 or 2 discoveries to really make it work for yourself. But in that case, you have to hold on and wait for results. The alternative is you buy it at a depressed level, like 17 cents. It moves to a more reasonable level, and you sell 50%, and you let the rest just ride. And that's probably the most safe way of doing it, because it's a very risky industry. You've got gold price or nickel price that will influence you. You have the company risk, dilution, exploration risk. There's so many reasons that the company can go down again, that you need to have a certain plan. But it's up to the investor, of course, to decide what is the best strategy for that investor.
Now, with this one specifically with Prospector, it seems like their options and warrants make up about a third of their fully diluted shares. Is that something you would look at in terms of it potentially having a drag on the share price if it starts moving?
Options, no, not so much. Warrants, yes. I'll always look at when were those warrants issued, how many warrants are outstanding, and you can have a look at you can see for every placement how many people participated. And if I see a placement with, for example, 150 people or 100 participants, and you look at the details and you see a lot of $10,000 orders, then you know for sure, almost for sure, that there will be quite a lot of people. Even you only need 10 or 15 people that sell, and you will have in this illiquid market quite a lot of volume selling, because these people have a free option. That's the warrant. But if it's just 3 or 4 or 5 people that participated in that round, and you can call the company and ask them like, hey, can you tell me who's your investor, or is it just a group? Or and sometimes they can give you a little bit of an idea who owns those warrants and if they are in good hands or not. And you never know for sure, but it can give you a bit of a feel for how much of a flipper is in there. And I think this company has a pretty good share structure, good shareholders. So I'm not too worried about the options and warrants in this case.
But so it's on a case per case basis. Like it's not something that you would say, okay, if it's 20% warrants, I'm out.
I don't have a strict rule like 20 or 15%, but let's just give an example. If I see a company with 80 million shares and another 60 million or 50 million warrants, and those warrants are at 15 cents and the company is trading at 13 cents, I'm probably not going to buy it because at 15 cents, which is just above the current price, 15 cents, you will have that enormous selling pressure, that roof basically that's very difficult to go through unless you have a big discovery. So that's probably going to be difficult. If you have 50, 60 million shares and 10 million warrants, and those are still 30 or 40% above the current price, it wouldn't keep me away. But I would prefer not to have a warrant, of course. But most companies do have some warrants outstanding, and then you have to investigate like how many people own those things.
Yeah, good point. That's a good lesson right here. What's next? Barksdale.
Yeah, Barksdale is a company I have to say is I'm very biased because I'm a shareholder already for many years, and it's also a substantial position for me. They're also a sponsor of Gold Discovery, so I'm biased in several ways. But they have this project right next to Taylor, and Taylor is a project owned by South 32. They acquired it probably 3 or 4 years ago for $1.5 or $2 billion from Arizona Mining, and they own the extension. And the reason we can call it an extension is because in the 70s, by a company, Asarco, I think, or something to that extent, they drilled a couple of holes. They drilled a porphyry, but they also drilled a couple of holes very close to the border with South 32. And they hit holes like 17 meters of 340 grams and 1% copper. So they know that they have the system, Taylor system, on their side of the property. It's just a question how much is on the Barksdale side, and the biggest issue so far has been, can they drill it? Because they couldn't. The permitting process was a really long. That took like 2 or 3 years, and that seems to be closed right now. They got basically a draft permit, and now there's an objection period, the last objection period that ends within 1 or 2 months from now, and then there will be a final decision, and that will still be a bit of a risk, of course, because you don't have a final go yet. But the people objecting can only object with the same reasons they have done before. So they could object like, hey, you haven't properly addressed this or that, and then the Forest Service will have to look at it again to see if they properly addressed something. If everything is properly addressed, then they will get their permit and they can start drilling probably in June. And that has been something that we have been waiting for, or we as shareholders, for about 2 or 3 years. And so May, June is going to be a very, very interesting month for Barksdale and the shareholders.
Okay. Seems like they don't have to raise capital before that.
That's right. No, that's right. They can start drilling without raising capital. And I made this chart that you can show here, where you can see all the drill holes that South 32 drilled in the last in Arizona as well in the last 6-7 years. And then you see those 4 holes that Barksdale has on their side of the property, and 2 of them are among the best ones that South 32 has ever drilled. So if they have more of that material, it's going to be very, very valuable. But again, that needs to be tested by the drill, and they need a permit for that. But if they get the permit, I am very optimistic about the company. But again, I'm biased.
Okay. These pre-permit plays, how do you evaluate the risk on those ones? Because it seems like many of those in over recent past have been struggling with permits, with locals, but also just red tape in the government. So how do you look at the risk there?
Yeah, I don't love that risk, to be honest, because you're depending on government officials giving you a stamp of approval, like, hey, yes, you can go ahead. And how can you really know? So looking back to Barksdale's last 2 years, there was a long process in which you lend your capital and your liquidity basically, and you give it away for a long time and nothing really happens. Of course, Barksdale has another project that they have been advancing, but it's difficult. Right now, luckily, there's a real time frame. So now that they have the draft permit, in Barksdale's case, there's a real deadline, and people who don't want to take that risk can better just wait for that final approval and then invest if they like the story. But for sure, of course, you have a lower entry when you buy it before. So it's really a risk management point of view. I have a couple of projects with a permitting risk, so to speak. For example, Trilogy is also the one with an amazing project, copper project, and they had this road permit withdrawn. But there's also a very, in my opinion, cheap company because of the permit issue they have. And once they get that permit, they will also be off to the races. But again, that's a certain risk you have to factor in.
What's next?
Yeah, we've got another one with some risks. This time not a permit, but Sun Peak Metals. In this case, I'm also biased because I also own shares, but I'm talking my book a little bit because these companies are the companies I like, and that's why I'd also like talking about it. And in my opinion, Sun Peak has one of the best exploration projects that I know, and that's really what I think. The problem is they listed in 2020, and it quickly went over $1. I think that was an 80 million market cap, or maybe I think they even hit 100 million market cap. And why? Because they have a pretty advanced, drill stage project in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region. And there was a lot of hype around it because it was a good gold market and people were investing. And then suddenly the civil war broke out between the Tigrayan region and the government, and that has been going on for 2 years. But since Sun Peak raised money at those high valuations, they had like 10 or 11 million in the bank when that happened. So they had also 2 years of nothing, a bit like Barksdale, just waiting. And this is really, if you look at the details of that war, that civil war, that's just like Ukraine. They are really, that's like you don't see it in the news a lot, but that was really a very difficult period, I think, for the people living there because they had no connection, nothing. But there's a peace agreement right now since last year, October. And that's why Sun Peak lifted up a little bit from 14 cents back to 25, 26. And looking at the projects, they have this team has made 2 big discoveries in Eritrea. That's just the country next door, so to say. And that's very close to the border. And what this team recognized is, hey, if we find all these VMS discoveries here in Eritrea, why wouldn't that continue across the border into Ethiopia? And that's why they acquired this project in 2016, I think, and started doing field work. And one of the projects is the Melly. They have like some really interesting intercepts, like 17 meter of 4% copper and 37 meter of 2% copper. So that's the project they have. But then there's that other project that I really like. That's Anguda North, where they had an old drill hole of 3 meter at 2% copper, the really like tiny zone. And they started taking soil samples, and they found a second zone north of it. And then they decided to do a gravity survey because the gravity survey was very successful during the previous discoveries. And they found this zone that they estimate to be, well, it's very difficult to estimate a zone based on gravity, but they say this could be like a $5 or $10 million million ton target because you don't get a signal like this on a 3 meter zone. But they decided to expand the gravity survey, and then suddenly they found this massive gravity anomaly. But of course, an anomaly. I mean, every company has anomalies on a map. So they did soil sampling, and they confirmed that the values were really high in the soils above that anomaly. So they decided to do an EM, an electromagnetic survey. And again, on top of that gravity anomaly, they have this really, really big EM conductor. And as a last step, they went on surface again, and then they found also a 800-meter Gaussian again on top of that anomaly. So they have 4 layers of evidence that there's something poking out of the ground over there. And what interests me is like buying a company at a valuation of 15 million or 20 million with 8 million in the bank with a very good chance of making a discovery and already having a discovery at Melly is a very interesting proposition. But again, you have to buy it in a country that is in a civil war. Something like Ivanhoe in 2004 in Congo. I mean, nobody wanted to invest in Congo at the time. And 4 years later, they made a big discovery. And I'm not comparing it to that good discovery because that's probably one of the best copper systems in the world. But it shows a little bit that investing in difficult countries, like Ivanhoe has done with Friedland, and like the Lundins have done often in the past, could pay off. But you have to accept the country risk, of course.
It seems like somebody's already, or at least some people are already running stuff a little bit. I don't want to use it as a negative term, but it's doubled over the last 6 months.
Yeah, that happened in October. So in October, the peace agreement was announced, and that's when the stock went from 14 cents to, I think at that time, 24 cents, and it has been at that level since then. So it's trading between a range of 24 and 27 cents. But the volume is very low because it's still risky. There's a peace agreement, but if you follow the news, the Eritrean people, the Tigray people, are not very satisfied with how quickly medical service are restored, connections are restored, transportation. But I think in the last couple of weeks there is some progress. But of course, there are also a lot of war victims. So I don't know if there will be trials. So it's still a very difficult situation, I think. But that's also reflected in this price. And the management team told me, like, hey, we have not been buying stock in the last couple of years because it feels a bit weird to take advantage of this bad situation. But I noticed that this week they started buying some stock again in the market by this insider buying report. And yeah, that could be a sign like, hey, there's a peace agreement. We believe we may be able to go to site again this year. That's also what they have published. They don't know if they can drill, but they are fairly confident that they can do some field work again this year. So that's something to look forward to. And yeah, I just wanted to show another story which has an amazing, in my opinion, exploration target. Not only Angola North, also Terror and Hemlo and the Melly target. So they have a number of amazing targets, but are in a situation that is quite difficult for the moment.
Right. It's interesting that it's their VP of Exploration and Geology who's been buying shares this week. He bought 75,000 shares, but he's got plenty already. He's got almost 6 million shares out of the 87 million outstanding. So not quite 10% to his own name, but getting up there. There's no warrants. Yeah, they expired in October, I believe, right before
that's right.
The jump at 15 cents, it says on here. But it's interesting he's buying that much, because if I look at the other insiders, let's see how much this Davis Gregory. Yeah. He's not, as you said, he's not been buying. Well, it's interesting to see if other insiders are going to follow him, but I like it when geologists are buying stuff.
Yeah, he's one of the founders, though. That's not a bad or a good thing, but he's one of the founders together with Greg Davis. And his role indeed is the exploration side of business. They have founded the company in 2016, and they have both been involved in the previous companies. And yeah, the targets are, in my opinion, one of the best that I know on the complete venture exchange. I just love these targets, but again, it's in a difficult country. Well, in a difficult situation right now, and hopefully that country just improves again. First of all, for the people, and but at some point, business will start up again, and that's then the risk you take. Like, um, is this company still? I don't think there's much risk of the company losing their tenements, because that could also be something that people could argue, like, hey, in a country like this, uh, um, could they just take the tenements away and start the process again? I think they've met recently, maybe a month or two ago, with the mines department, and I think everything is in good standing. Next to them is Newmont. They also have a pretty interesting project, but they are not reporting on their results. But there are some rumors that they also have some good results as well on their side of the property. So I think it's an amazing property, but the risk here is not the permit, but really the country opening up again.
Okay, that's sort of a bet on that. And then you have, once it opens, you do have the property there. I know Rick Rowe likes this type of bet. So this is an interesting case study. I might start following this one and see how it develops. So next one you have on here is San Lorenzo Gold Corp. Again, a very small company that always gets me sort of almost a little bit scared. What's happening there?
Yeah, I think you should be. No, it's a very small company, and I don't understand this company. So I would actually explain why, and maybe people can also inform me what they think, because I cannot really get my head around this thing. They announced a discovery in October last year, and they called it 112 meter of 1.17% copper equivalent. But if you look at it, the copper is just 10%, and the gold is like 90% of that intercept. So it's a bit weird that they call it a copper equivalent hole, in my opinion. But it's a real discovery. It is quite deep, but all the holes they have drilled before and all the work they've done before was like mediocre. And maybe for a geologist, it is very encouraging. But for me, as a market speculator, all the results before this were not very interesting as a market participant, so to say. And suddenly they drilled this pretty interesting hole, which is deep, but still, this is a $3 million company, and it did not even move. There was no volume at all. I talked to the company a little bit, and I cannot really understand why there's no new funding, why the company has not been doing anything in terms of releasing news since then. This property is really close to one of the bigger mines in Chile. There's a big mine nearby that has been operating for 50 years, and then to drill a hole like this without any follow-up is difficult to understand. So I just wanted to put it out there. It's something that I don't understand. I own a little bit of stock, not much, because I see the uncertainty around, can they not fund the company? What's the reason that the progress just almost like stopped, in my opinion, when you follow the public announcements. So maybe other people have also an idea about this and can share this in the YouTube comments, or maybe just contact me. But I'm interested to learn more about it, because I cannot understand it. It's $3 million. I think any team that drills something like this thinks like, wow, we need to do something with this. Let's tell everyone. But apparently, that's not what's happening.
It's a weird situation. They don't have cash, as you said. I mean, at least based on their presentation, they say that over here that they had they have $1 million Canadian in debt that was due in November of 21, which is like one and a half years.
I think it's from the main shareholder, and I've talked to the shareholder a couple of months ago, and I do have to. A bit of respect for him, because he's funding the company, he's giving loans to avoid dilution. So there seems to be some goodwill, but I actually cannot really find out why the company is not really progressing. And maybe there are certain talks with bigger parties that want to get a investment into it, and that's maybe a very long negotiation process. But that's just really guesswork from my side. I can really not understand why, after such an intercept, nothing is happening. So I can just guess, and that guess could be completely wrong. I'm also not suggesting that's the case. I'm just thinking like, why after such a hole are you not making like quick progress? Why are you not screaming, making presentations, get investors excited? But I've not seen anything from the company, not from a marketing point of view, not from a news point of view. So it's a bit weird, but something to watch potentially.
Yeah. I see on here there's someone whose last name is Kronche.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the main shareholder.
oh, that's the main shareholder.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
He's been buying in the open market, just
Hmm.
nibbling away at the stock ever since the end of last year.
Yeah.
So 100,000 shares here, 200 there, just buying at 6, 7 cents in the open market.
Yeah, I
It's
think he's bidding.
curious.
I think he's bidding all the time. So I think everyone who sells is probably selling into his bid, and that's I think a good thing to do as a key shareholder. To I mean, if nobody's bidding and you think the value is there, then it makes sense to have your bid out there and catch get any shares that you can get at this level. But what I don't understand is, and also after my conversation, I don't really get why there's no real promotional push or maybe a financing or maybe a news release about the next steps. Um,
Hmm.
it's really a really odd one. I've not often seen something like this before, where in my opinion something very interesting happened by this drill hole, and nothing. We are half a year later right now or more, and nothing has happened.
Yeah. It even fell 15% on Friday.
Yeah, and that's why I noticed it this week in the list. That's why I selected it because there was always a bit of a bid at 6, 7 cents, and suddenly that bid probably dropped. I'm not interested to buy more. I have a very small position just to stay interested, but I'm waiting to see some update before I get more excited.
Hmm. Okay. Well, yeah. Curious situation.
Yep.
I don't really have a conclusion, but it's an interesting one to watch, I guess. The next one does have a drill result. It's a larger company too, Delta Resources. What can you tell me there?
Yeah, we discussed Delta a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and I think I mean I understood why the company was getting more popular because they had some really good results last year on the Delta One project, and I was a shareholder. But I recently sold my stock because I couldn't really follow the price action anymore. Even though I see that the property, I mean that something changed last year by they hit visible gold, then they assayed it. They had a really spectacular intercept, really something very different from before because they had these very wide intercepts but low grade, like zero point 0.4, zero point 0.3 grams over 100 meters, and they have hit those type of holes like over a period of 2 or 3 years. But it was always quite low grade, and they are pretty close to Goldshore, who also has a big project in that region of Ontario, Thunder Bay, and suddenly they drill this higher grade hole with a 2 meter 80 gram I think intersect and 5 or 6 grams over 30 meter which includes that 80 gram intercept, and they have been following up on this, and they have been buying a lot of ground around it to just increase their land position. So it's obvious that the team believes that they have something, and that's why I understand the price went from 5, 6, 7 cents to 20 cents and to 30 cents. But at some point, it was a little bit too much for me because we were waiting for the next essays, and they came out last week. So the stock was I think at 50 cents. The results came out, and I think the results are really good. But what you often see is that the expectation build and build and build because of the share price, and then news comes out, and then suddenly the company drops. I cannot really say what is the valuation right, what should be the valuation right now because it's early still. They're stepping out, they're doing big step outs, and they're hit every time, which is a good sign. I think right now is the time to get maybe a financing done with a bigger name, maybe with a strategic investor or maybe with a corporate to confirm that bigger companies also believe in this project because they are at a point right now where the market may have been a bit disappointed or maybe the expectation became too big and the company dropped a bit. But they stepped out and every hole has hit, I think, so far since the discovery last year of high grade gold. So I think everything is fine. Everything is good with this company. It just, the valuation went a little bit. The valuation was not crazy, but it was without results. And then the results come, and then suddenly the company drops. So that may be an opportunity to get back in at a bit lower level. I'm watching because I think there should be a financing pretty soon. Another reason I sold was there will be a financing coming, free trading soon, which often also provides new paper coming out again. So I was like, company has been running. I had a 3 or 4 bagger on it. No news yet. Free trading halt, or the 4-month hold period is almost coming. So that's why I sold, not because of the project. And indeed, the company went down on it. But I still think that the company is making good progress, and will drill this a bit more to find out how big it is. And yeah, hopefully they can get some support from bigger players.
Yeah, financing would make sense. I guess stock has tripled year to date. About 40. That's actually almost quadrupled, as you said, year to date.
Yeah.
So it would make sense. Yeah, financing would make sense. Okay, I don't really have anything to add there. It seems the other project is in the Chibougamau area of Quebec, where one of my personal holdings is. So that's also maybe an interesting one to look at, but it seems like a smaller project, if I'm not mistaken.
It is also a very interesting project. And they have 2 targets, one VMS target and one gold target. The gold target has hit some pretty interesting results so far, like 3 meters of 30 grams. But they have not really been confirming it. I think it's like a bit spotty. So it's not really, but it's a very interesting property. They have been working on that as well for 2 or 3 years. And like Delta 1, it's a very interesting one, but early stage. And some people prefer to buy after a drill hit like this. And for Delta 2, I think that's the case. They haven't made a confirmed discovery yet. And this Delta 1 property is a real discovery. The question is, how big is it? And will it be enough for it to work? But it looks pretty good, I think, the Delta 1. And as a company, I already followed it like years ago when it was trading at 40 or 50 cents. But then they had to dilute to drill, and that stock came free trading. There was a bad market, and then the stock went down to 5, 6, 7 cents. And I started buying it because at 3 or 4 million market cap, with a good team and good projects, that's the time when you want to buy it. And there was so much stock available from the previous placements that I got in at a really low level. But when it was trading at 40 cents again, with an expanded share structure, I was like, man, let's just sell my stock for the moment and see what happens with the next results. And I think the results are good, but maybe the expectations were a bit higher, and that's why the company sold off a little bit this week. But I don't think it's a big problem. It's fine to have a little bit of a consolidation and before, otherwise you cannot just go up in one straight line. So I think the company is doing well so far.
All right. I think that's about it. Based on what you send me, anything else you want to add here?
No, I'm good. I think we're still eagerly awaiting for drill holes from Regency and Tower, and we discussed it a couple of times. And I think next week, finally, maybe the week. Both of them also had that big anticipation rally, and now the essays need to tell the real story.
All right, good points. Thanks a lot for doing this.
All right, thank you.